I'm Nicole Nalepa, and you're listening to Mommyhood Unscripted, real talk about moms for moms.
Welcome, everyone. In today's episode, we're putting the focus on self-care in the form of nutrition. Food is fuel, and let's face it, the last person we're putting first when it comes to our families is ourselves. So we're chatting with certified nutritionist and owner of Nourish and Nosh, Pachniuk, who has some great tips and tricks to share. Enjoy her food for thought.
Yeah, let's just dive right into this. I really wanted to put the focus on self-care for moms because I feel that nutrition falls under self-care. It's one of the main pillars, and it's something that I feel we forget about. You know, we focus so much on our children, especially when you're a first-time mom, you don't know what to expect. And then everything goes out the window, even though everyone's saying everything that you do is for the baby, you need to eat, everything that you put in your body is affecting the baby. And, you know, to a certain extent, I think it holds up and you follow through with it. But then I don't know what happens between the lack of sleep, you know, the feeding around the clock, it's such a new adjustment and so much changes. So thank you for joining us.
Of course. And you're right. It's like you have so much on your plate, figuratively speaking, that you read the books, you do all the prep work, but there's never prep work for how to continue to take care of yourself in that fourth trimester and beyond from a nutrition standpoint, because our nutritional needs do shift, obviously, from pregnancy to postpartum. And then they shift again when we are, raising these tiny humans who are eating what we're eating and are eating on a schedule, yet we're eating their scraps. We're forgetting to eat, barely drinking any water. And then all of a sudden we're like, why is my energy so low? Is it because I'm chasing a toddler? Or is it because I haven't had a real meal in 8 hours?
Right. And that's a real thing. That's a reality for so many moms. I don't know anyone who I haven't talked to who, doesn't put themselves first with nutrition. And, food is fuel, right? You need that energy to sustain things, and you can't operate on an empty tank. You can't get anywhere that far.
It's like we are so concerned on the fuel that we're putting into their bodies. We think about an outing and you bring that little lunch tote with so many snacks for your kids and you bring nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I packed my daughter her little snack thing today for school and I 100% forgot to bring my own food to work today. Luckily, I work next to a grocery store, so it's fine. But I thought that was very ironic today. I'm like, of course, I'm talking about nutrition and self-care. And I literally put my needs last this morning because I'm trying to get out the door. So, even for a nutritionist, it's still a struggle and it's still, a work in progress, and finding what's going to work best for you is ultimately the goal. And we're all different. That's another thing I always like to say to people. Just because your friend is telling you what works for them, listen to them, maybe pick up some pointers, but it may not be appropriate for you in your life. And so a lot of it is trial and error and figuring out what is going to work best in your family, in your life, with your day-to-day activities and things like that, and timing and whatnot.
I love what you said. Even for a nutritionist, this is a reality because, you could be an expert in your field and you can still struggle in that area because we're all human. And I think it's so important to talk about this today and to talk with you because you bring that humanistic side to things. You're going to give us some great tips and tricks and let us know, what your thoughts are on this and based upon your experience. And also you're speaking from experience of being a mom.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, I work with a lot of moms in my practice, and it's very much the same story over and over of, okay, so you're making sure everyone else is taken care of, but what about you? And in a way, they love that it's my job to worry about them, and they have someone looking out for them and offering support and guidance and accountability. But I think the number one thing, to start really changing our view is it's so easy to fall into that rut of cooking is stressful. I don't like it. It's easier to order takeout. I don't have time. There's not enough hours in the day. I hear that a lot. There's not enough hours in the day for me to go to the grocery store to prep the food and to cook the food, whether it's coming from the mom or a partner, it's a struggle. And I think the first step is always changing that view and really identifying what part of this is really stressing you out, because we're all different. Some people it's grocery shopping. I've met so many people who that is the bane of their existence. They don't like going into the store. They get overwhelmed. And this has nothing to do with the pandemic. This was like pre-pandemic.
Before, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just gotten worse now. And, identifying, well, is it that, or is it the prep work, or is it the cooking? What part is stressing you out the most? What part do you dislike? And then identifying that one piece and saying, okay, let's pretend it's grocery shopping. What can I do to alleviate the stress? And maybe it's doing the order where the food gets delivered to your house.
Mhm.
That is now a thing that a lot of people are still doing. What if it's curbside pickup? You don't actually have to go into the store. You just pull your car up, they put it in.
Right.
So not looking at that as, oh, I don't need to do that. I don't have infants at home. Like, I don't need to. Well, no, if it's stressing you out and that's your biggest roadblock to get started on, building that positive relationship around, food, cooking food, sharing food with family, well, then that's figuring out a system that's going to work best for you and to alleviate that stress. If it's the food prep, then maybe you're buying everything prepped for you. It's a little bit extra money, but again, if it relieves that stress, because that's your biggest thing, then do it. Or delegate, have another family member do the work that you really despise doing. Because when we look at nutrition as self-care, if it's something that it's no longer self-care if it makes us miserable.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Right.
Right.
If we really hate it and we're sitting there, cursing into cutting the carrots and the celery to make a soup, and you're so miserable, and all the best podcasts in the world are not making you happy in that moment. The music, Taylor Swift can't even do it. She's not even making you happy in that moment of cutting up things. It's not self-care. And so that's taking that step even before then. What part of this is making me miserable, and how can I fix it so I could get to the finish line of either putting something together that's nutritious for my family, or something that will give me lunches for 4 days so I don't have to worry about lunches. It's just there in the fridge waiting for me, where when you're packing in the morning and you're a little frantic, you're just grabbing it and going, and you're like, this is really convenient. I have a nice, lovely hot lunch that I didn't make in that moment. It's something I made a few days ago. I know I love it. This is really nice. This is enjoyable. I'm not running out to get takeout at lunchtime in my little time period to get food. So it's, the first step is always identifying the stressor and then working on ways to fix that and to change our way of looking at it. And again, finding methods that will make that less stressful, either the food being dropped off at your home, buying the stuff pre-cooked, delegating. Maybe it's even supporting a partner while they cook, but you doing some of the work, so it makes their, tackling it sort of in a partner way.
Right. I have to be honest. I don't mind the shopping. I love the pickup now, that feature, curbside pickup. It's the best invention ever. And the prep work, I like being a sous chef and pretending I'm on a cooking channel and listening to music. It's the actual cooking that I struggle. So in that situation, what would you say? Have everything prepped and delegate with your partner to do the actual cooking part?
If the cooking part is what stresses you out, or you're not confident in it, then I would do the prep work. And then it's like a tag team thing of, if I prep it, even if you prep it hours ahead of time, which isn't always appropriate for what you're cooking, but if you get a lot of the stuff that you don't mind doing, then the actual cooking side of it is easy for the person you're switching off with. Or, another great thing is, if you don't mind that part, that's where like a crock pot dish could be great, because all you're doing is putting it in.
Right.
You like the cutting and the prepping, which is great. You just put it all in and turn the thing on.
Set it and forget it.
Set it and forget it. Add your protein and you're good to go. But a lot of it is approaching it from now. I am saying this from, a point of privilege and knowing that I have a partner in my home and we share these responsibilities, and not everyone has that.
Right.
So for the people in a partnership, you can delegate if you can. And if you're not if you're in a position where maybe your partner works a different shift than you and you are two ships passing in the night, or however they say, it does kind of fall on you, then it's all about streamlining and keeping it simple. So you like the prep work, but maybe the protein part makes you nervous or the spices make you nervous, then rely on a recipe where no thought from you is going into it. You're just following it. A lot of people who enjoy cooking, they may like the act of it, but the seasoning, the flavoring can be a little overwhelming. They didn't go to culinary school.
Right.
That's where recipes come in handy. I'm not talented in that. So I rely on the work that other people have done to tell me what spices to put in. And even part of the, setting the stage for a meal, I will put my spices in a little bowl so that when I am putting it in, it's just easy. I just dump it because maybe I have a window of time over here to do some of the prep work, but I lose that window here because of parenting responsibilities or work. So that's the other thing I wanted to point out too, is we, think about when Pinterest came out and we were all looking at those beautiful, maybe this is because I'm a nutritionist and this is what I look at on Pinterest, but all those like beautiful photos of people prepping everything.
Yeah.
I feel so, newsflash, nobody does it like that.
What do you mean?
Especially
Those pictures are not real life?
I've been a nutritionist for a decade. I can count on one hand how often I've had people attempt that, and it's never sustainable. And especially then becoming a mom, it's like, that's really not sustainable. I don't have a chunk of time to do that, because the second you start, your child needs you, you have to step away.
Right.
So that's not realistic. And so I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make it perfect. And in reality, we don't need to strive for that. I very much, since becoming a mom, have adopted the divide and conquer approach, which is
that.
Well, it works. And not looking at our week like this, right? Monday through Friday. And, a lot of people will say, oh, I do all my grocery shopping, all my prepping, all my cooking on Sunday. Good for you. But for a busy mom, it's like Sunday is the day we want to spend time with our families.
Right.
Maybe we accomplish one of those things. Maybe we go grocery shopping. Great. You buy the food, you put it in your house. Great. Divide and conquer over the next couple days. If you have a window of time where you have the cutting board out and a knife and you're prepping some stuff for dinner, you're prepping some stuff earlier in the day for your honey to make at dinner time, you've got the knife, you got the cutting board, take a minute and say, what else can I wash and cook right now while I'm here? What else can I do? And the other thing I'm big with, especially with busy moms, if your oven is on, take a second. What else can I throw in my oven?
Right.
Maybe it's not for that night. Maybe it's for the next night, but your oven is on, it's doing the work. Let's make it work as efficiently as possible by throwing, you got some sweet potatoes in the fridge. I want to eat them tomorrow, but let me cook them tonight so I can just reheat them tomorrow. So it's taking that second to say, okay, what else can I do in this moment instead of trying to shove it all onto one Sunday, Sunday afternoon, because that's exhausting. Being a mom is tiring. Mm-hmm. And when you throw trying to do all of it on a Sunday, where maybe you've done a bunch of activities, you chased your child around a zoo for the day, it's like, I just want to do one thing. Yeah. And maybe you do just one thing. Maybe it's just organizing the fridge so you know where everything is. And so a lot of it is being realistic and letting go of that perfection and trying to, make it work for you without adding more stress, right? Which isn't going to be doing it all in one day. And if that works for you, great. But if you need to divide and conquer, that works too, or delegate with that.
And it's not that one size fits all approach. And I love what you said a little earlier, how, we try to make things as perfect as possible. And I feel like that is the biggest pitfall not only in moms, but just in women in general. We have the pressure from, when we grew up with Pinterest and saw all of these picture perfect things, and then throw in Instagram and the filters that you put on and all of these stories and these, these mom influencers, which they do amazing work. And there's, so much that goes into that. But for your average mother who is juggling a job, whether that be staying at home, watching the kids full time, whether that be, going into an office or a workplace and then trying to cook and then trying to put the kids to bed, and your spouse is on another, schedule, or maybe you don't have the support at home and a spouse to help you out there, or family that's close by. What works for one person, like you said before, doesn't work for another. And I wish we could like scream it for the people in the back to hear, like, it's not realistic. That is not the way life is. And you have to figure out your roadmap to see what works for you and your family, and it all has to start with us, right? Because if we're not good, it's going to throw everything else off, the whole rhythm for the rest of your family and, especially your children. And that's why, that it all starts, I feel like, with food in the kitchen. Like there's something to be said about, what you eat and the fuel and the habits that you get into, what your kids learn from you. It's so important to fill your cup up before you help everyone else out.
And that's the thing too, you hit the nail on the head with setting the right example for your family. Kids are watching everything that their parents are doing. And when we think about creating healthy habits in our children, one of the easiest things we can do is have them either observe us in the kitchen or have them get involved, obviously depending entirely on the age. One of my favorite, gifts, somewhat my parents got my daughter, was one of those learning towers that like you can push them up to the counter.
Oh yeah.
Like, so now she's helping me mix things. I mean, it's not always like the cleanest thing, but like she's getting involved. She has a different, she's 3, so she can't always see what I'm doing because she's 3.
Right.
So bringing her up so she can watch. She recently got a cutting board and a knife, so she's practicing cutting her bananas, which is great. And so I think from a like nutrition and children standpoint, getting them involved and even just the observing, they learn a lot from watching. And so they see what the food looks like. And from a sensory perspective as well, you let them touch it, you let them feel it, smell it if they want, look at the different textures and colors. It's a great teaching moment. All of that sounds well and good, but on a Tuesday night, you just need to get dinner cooked. You may say, hey, go color for a minute while I get this ready. And, it's hard because we want to set the good example. We also want to fuel our body, but we also need to get dinner on the table like 5 minutes ago because we're all of our blood sugar is dropping and we're getting really cranky.
Right.
So it's finding that it's all about streamlining it for your family and finding what systems work best for you. And I have not cracked the code. I have not like solved this. I mean, again, like I still struggle as well, but like I was saying to you earlier, I took a lot of methods from a business coaching class I took where they talked about creating systems and streamlining, and immediately thought of all my clients and immediately thought of the things that they struggle with and tied it into, okay, so you really struggle with packing lunch for the day. Okay, so let's talk about, what are some ways that we can streamline this? Maybe it's batch cooking something just for lunch. We always assume batch cooking for dinner, which is great. But what if we just did a sheet pan meal just for your lunches? You're not sharing it with anyone. You're not eating it for dinner. It is just your lunches. And if you could get 4 meals out of something, 5 would be ideal, but that's not always the case with how protein is packaged in the store. Maybe you get 4 meals out of it. That's 4 lunches that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to stress about. You're saving time packing. But it takes that moment it takes that step ahead, step before all this begins of what protein do I want for those lunches? What are the vegetables that I want? And what's the flavor profile I'm looking for? And keep it simple. Do a sheet pan, do a soup, do something in one, crock pot or an Instant Pot, and let it cool, divide it, put it together in the fridge. There's your lunches. It's the same way, maybe if, you're a mom in the morning packing food for kids, like for lunch or something like that. I know some people say to do it the night before. I've always had a hard time with that because some things I just don't think taste good if you're packing it the night before the next day.
Right.
So like, that's something that doesn't work for me. I tried it. I thought stuff looked a little dried out and a little like slimy. So I do it in the morning. But if I'm packing something for her, I'm also packing stuff for me because the idea of balancing blood sugar with snacks for my tiny human is the same for me. So it's the same sort of balance. So again, if I have the little knife and the cutting board out and I may have to cut her stuff a little smaller, I'm taking, some of the honeydew from her lunchbox and putting in a container for me to bring to work. So it's like in that moment, you're thinking of them, take that extra second of what am I going to eat today? Like I'm going to the grocery store, I'm buying the stuff they like, but I also need to eat. Let me make sure I'm adding that to my list. What vegetables do I want to eat as a snack, or what fruit, or what proteins? And so it's the method is going to be different for everyone. Some people have apps on their phone. I do a good old fashioned pen and paper on my counter. So if something pops in my head, I jot it down for either myself or my husband to go to the store and pick it up. But it's streamlining. It's finding systems in your kitchen. It's knowing where your containers are to put the food in. You don't want to be, digging through a cabinet trying to find a matching top to a bottom, which we've all done.
Yeah.
That burns time, increases stress. Increasing stress is not part of self-care, right? Self-care is remembering to take care of ourselves. But if we just jump in head first and do no prep work for ourselves, it's going to make us stress out. So knowing where our containers are. Another big tip I have is knowing your inventory and not having too much backstock. Backstock was a term that got really popular, after, we all got on that organizing kick, and it's great. But for people who are feeding many mouths, too much backstock takes up too much room. And then you're losing things. You can't find things. Backstock is important, but don't go overboard. And another good tip is having 1 to 2 quick meals. So perfect example, this is something I always have in my freezer, is frozen chicken sausage, because it can go from the freezer to my belly in 20 minutes, because it's just a quick protein to cook up, as opposed to like frozen, chicken thighs. It's going to take a long time to defrost.
Right.
Maybe you do breakfast.
Give yourself permission to get something that's readily available and quick. I think just a little sidebar here. I put so much pressure and get so overwhelmed about planning out meals because I'm constantly thinking, oh, well, this isn't organic and this is, frozen and this is already pre-prepped. And, you can get so overwhelmed at even the selection when really you're forgetting, just do what's easy. If you're not eating, fast food every single night, then that's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to get something that's frozen and already kind of pre-made.
And the thing too, to point out, especially now in 2022, and this is something in my practice pre-pandemic, I probably didn't push the stocking up on frozen vegetables as much as I do now. But do you remember that period of time we all do where we are going grocery shopping like once every 2 weeks? We were really trying not to leave our homes. I was still counseling clients virtually during that time. And I was noticing with myself, I'm like, okay, I need this food to last. The fresh food, I can't stock up on that much fresh food. It's going to spoil. So let me stock up on frozen. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the frozen vegetables in the supermarket. Now, what you do want to avoid are the frozen vegetables that come with like the sauces and things like that, because those are going to be, a high source of hidden sodium. Well, not even that hidden because they're transparent with the labeling, but sodium, sugar as well. So you want to keep it simple. And that's always a great way, especially on a night where maybe something like a plan B, right? So you had blank, but blank went bad or someone ate it and, you're your plan is starting to fall, instead of saying, you know what, forget it, I'm just ordering takeout, having that plan B. So for a protein, a chicken sausage is always a great one because again, it cooks quickly, or maybe pre-cooked meatballs that you've made that you've frozen. It's not going to go bad. It's sitting in the freezer waiting for its moment to shine. And maybe on that night, it's a perfect grab. Frozen vegetables are also a great way to elevate meals. So maybe you have your plate and you're putting stuff together. You're like, you know what? I need something else. Like I feel like this meal's missing something. A lot of times I'll take, like, let's say it's a stir fry. I'll take a bag of frozen, let's say like frozen rice cauliflower. I'll cut the bag. So I won't even use the whole bag. And maybe I just sprinkle half of it. I reseal it, put it back in the freezer for another time, and I'm adding it to the meal. Frozen vegetables are great for that. And, you know, the pre-cut food in the supermarket is also fine. And again, you have to weigh your options. Am I going to skip vegetables because I hate cutting them?
Right.
Or will I actually eat them if they're pre-cut? So you have to sort of ask yourself, okay, this actually is a great choice because I'm going to be eating them. I'll munch on the snap peas because they're ready for me to eat them, you know, in this package. Maybe you give them a rinse, but it saves you time and energy. So having those plan B backup options are important when schedules change, food goes bad, you ran late at work or someone ran late at work, and then you get home, you're like, oh my gosh, we have like 30 minutes. What am I going to do? Instead of always jumping to let me just order takeout, which, listen, I love supporting local restaurants. It's again, nutrition is self-care. It's knowing what you're putting into your body. So making that choice of, you know what, I got this. I'm going to, you know, maybe I'll do scrambled eggs with a bunch of veggies for my family and have breakfast for dinner. You know, that's always a good.
That's a favorite in our house. I think with, you know,
Same.
Kids hear that and they're like, woohoo, it's like a holiday, you know?
Exactly. And you're like, actually it's protein and fiber. So this is a great holiday.
Exactly. And Kara, I just wanted to ask you really quickly, you know, obviously we're talking about meat products, but for any of our listeners who are vegetarians or vegan, what would you recommend that they, you know, throw in, and how do you balance the protein in that?
They have an easier, they definitely have an easier go at it because, you know, you're not freezing things. So you lose that sort of roadblock of getting something prepared. Now, having said that, you know, if you were to, let's say, batch cook quinoa, for example, which is a complete protein, you don't want to necessarily batch cook a very large amount and then you end up wasting it. So I always say, like, batch cook in reasonable portions. Cans of beans are fabulous to have on hand. You know, I always keep, you know, probably 10 cans of a variety of beans on hand for if I'm making a soup and I just don't want to put animal protein in it. I'll rinse a can of beans and add that in. So anyone who's cutting down their animal protein consumption definitely has an easier, you know, when we're talking about quick and, you know, simple and just ways to get food ready for the family. You know, a lot of, and there's even now a lot of protein pastas made out of chickpeas or lentils, which are also fabulous options. Just make sure you get your veggies with it. And so, yeah, those are definitely some great, you know, beans, lentils, things that don't necessarily take a ton of time to prepare. Lentils may take a little bit longer, but certainly beans are really simple. Having some tofu in the fridge is great. Yeah, you know, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a proponent of having a few meatless meals for my animal protein consumers, just to lighten the pressure on that industry and to get more variety in your diet. There's a lot of fabulous fiber in the plant proteins, and I think sometimes we're missing out on that. So it's great to add those in during the week.
Yeah, it's a whole new world now, a whole new game changer with the plant protein on the market, which is, you know, which is great. And I think people may be pleasantly surprised if they give it a try. And if they don't like it, well, at least they tried, right? Setting an example for our kids.
Exactly. And, you know, it's like getting them involved. You know, I remember making like a bean soup when my daughter was little and like just throwing some beans on her high chair. Remember that stage when they would just eat anything you gave them?
Oh, I miss that stage so much.
So
And I think that's like one of the biggest stressors too, and the overwhelming factor, I would say, that why, I know personally, I kind of throw out self-care with nutrition half the time is because I'm so focused, as we were talking about, on what they're going to eat. And the thought of making two separate meals, because I know, even though I'm going to give him something to try, I know where he's at with certain things, and I need to have that backup on hand for him. And it just gets really stressful thinking about, oh boy, I'm doing two dinners.
And that's understandable. I mean, there's a lot of times in our household, I'm cooking something that is spicy. Like I want spicy food sometimes, and she's not going to eat that. I'm not going to force her to eat, an incredibly spicy meal, obviously.
Right.
So and this is where I'll say the freezer does come in handy. So frozen meatballs are great for kids that you've made and thrown in the freezer. I actually have a great recipe. It's on my blog. I think I just reposted it, but it was like 5 dishes to bring to a new mom. And
that's great.
Yeah. And one of them was these chicken meatballs that I make. Absolutely love them. They're so yummy. And those I'll keep in the freezer. And I know my daughter likes them. So if I'm cooking something that I know she's not going to eat, then she'll get a few meatballs. And then you always want color for your kids. So protein and color. So then I'll look, okay, she's got her protein. And then I'll look at, what vegetables can I cut up for her? Now, kids are funny with texture. Sometimes they want things raw. Sometimes they want things cooked. So if something like, let's say peppers, my daughter loves peppers, I'll cut those up super quick, but she also likes peas. I'm not going to give her frozen peas. So I'll boil some water. And again, I'll cut the bag of frozen vegetables just to take a little bit out and then reseal it. So I'm not cooking a whole bag.
Right.
I'm maybe cooking like a portion for her, letting it sit in some hot water while I'm getting everything ready, strain it, put it on her plate. And there she's got green, red, and protein, keeping it sort of simple. And maybe I throw some cheese on it because I know she loves cheese.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it may not be my exact meal, but it's quick. But just think, you want to check off all the boxes. Are you getting enough protein? Are they getting enough protein? It may be different proteins, and that's okay. Are you getting enough color on your plate? Are they getting enough color on their plate? Color, variety equals good nutrition. You want to have that diversity in what you're putting into your body. So a lot of that stems back to the grocery shopping. So making sure that you're not buying the same vegetables week after week after week after week. You want to diversify it and then, pick up something different each time you go, which strengthens our microbiome, which helps support a good immune system. So everything, ties in, which then makes us feel better. And what is like the whole root of self-care? Doing things that make us feel good. So all of a sudden these meals sit really well in our body. We're not hungry 2 hours later. We're feeling really good. We could tackle the bedtime routine just that much better because we have stabilized blood sugar. And then we could go to bed and get that good restorative sleep that we so desperately need every single night.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And you hope, once you start small, and like you have referenced, since we started chatting, that it's going to be gradual. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to give yourself some credit, give yourself some slack, and just one thing at a time. Like you said, identifying and how to streamline and what works for you in your household. And I think that after a time, and I'm not speaking from experience because I haven't even started to tackle this. I struggle so bad with cooking, but it's like going to be like a conditioned response, right? Where we'll start to feel the good effects of it. And
it doesn't have to be miserable. Listen, I literally am promoting or talking to clients all day about getting them in the kitchen more. And I get a lot of pushback from people where they're like, I really don't like cooking. It's like, okay, but you have to, you have to eat every single day. Like you have to nourish your body. There's no magic pill that's a substitution for food. And I'm not saying you need to like love it and become a chef, but we need to start learning these basic skills to then feed ourselves. And I think sometimes this happens where kids don't learn those skills and then they become adults. And the thought of cooking, if it didn't become an interest in their life, it just is something that's so overwhelming So that's why, again, with moms, it's like, get your kids involved, let them see you do it. Even if they maybe sometimes make it harder, it's such a good example to be setting for them. And in your hope is that then they become, teenagers who know what vegetables look like when they're grown. You take them to the farmer's market, you let them touch things, again, the sensory integration side of it, and you let them smell the food, you let them try something. Again, it sounds all well and good, and I know it's really hard to actually execute it, but if you could do it once in a while, that's really, really beneficial for them. And then it becomes something that you guys do together.
Right.
And it starts to become less of this task, like having to like clean a toilet. Like, cooking shouldn't be as miserable as like cleaning a toilet. It should be something that, we don't mind doing, and that sometimes we like it more than others. Sometimes we're trying something new. That's another thing. If you want to try something new, throw it on a week where you're not super stressed out with work, that you're not stretched too thin. That's the day to try something new. And maybe it's once every 2 weeks you try a new recipe. Sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. It's okay for something to not come out perfect. Don't let it destroy your confidence. Just make mental note, move on, try something new, another time. There's so many blogs out there. There's so many great Instagram accounts that show you really quick and easy ways to throw a meal together. And again, just check off your boxes. Are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough fiber? Are you getting a good fat with that meal? And make sure, that's at the root of it. That's your equation: protein, fat, and fiber. For you, your tiny humans, just fill in the blanks. If it's not perfect, if your fiber is just cutting up a bunch of peppers and throwing it on a plate, so be it. At least you're getting it in. That's a win.
Right. It doesn't matter about the presentation of it all the time. Just don't
Exactly.
focus so much on that perfect Instagram photo or Pinterest photo that we grew up with.
And I feel like on my Instagram, like half the meals I'll do an Insta story on, I always think, I'm like, why do I choose like the most unphotogenic, kind of like not the nicest looking, but I'm like, you know what? This is real. And those are the ones people are like, thank you for sharing this.
Right.
Because you made it look easy. And sure, it's not beautiful, but it looks yummy and it came out good. So
yeah, and it checks all the boxes that you just said that are so important. Yeah. And those boxes are so important to check off. And I'm glad that you really reiterated and listed those off. And, I mean, from a nutritionist standpoint, it's okay, to order out though, when you have those nights where you're like, oh, all right, I'm not cooking, or it's okay to give yourself a pass and enjoy a dessert or a treat. Right.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like, especially when you're ordering out, because again, as we are saying, it's so easy now. Like, you can do it from your phone, you could prepay, they'll bring it to your car sometimes. Like, it's really, really easy. Keep those boxes in your mind. Are you getting enough protein? And the reason I say that so often is when we fall short on that, that's when we don't feel as well later. If we're taking in highly processed meal, a high carbohydrate meal, we're not going to feel our best in 3 to 4 hours. So getting your protein and fiber in, even if from your local restaurant, is fine, but don't forget that protein and fiber component because of what it makes you, or because of how it makes you feel. Again, think of it from a mom perspective. You want to feel good at bedtime. Bedtime is stressful. We all know this. Like, bedtime is the most stressful part of parenting. You want to be on your A game during that time. You don't want to feel that crash at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, ordering takeout is fine if it, but again, just check the boxes, and having a dessert is fine, but make sure you check the boxes beforehand. So again, you're not feeling that blood sugar crash at bedtime. You're not falling asleep while they're in the bathtub, obviously.
Exactly. You're not, or falling asleep when they're in bed and, they're jumping on the bed and that's my favorite when I've kind of reached the point and my son's like, mom, wake up. I'm like, oh yeah, let me sing you that song. I get so tired, you're ready for bed before they are.
Exactly. So again, getting the right fuel in the tank can really impact like those things like bedtime routine. It's kind of an interesting connection to make, but just of how food processes, if you've had that, heavy meal, you're going to be dozing off before they do. Absolutely.
It's all
yeah.
fuel. It's all fuel. And it makes so much sense. And I'm so glad that you were able to explain things in layman's terms, because again, I just think that this is one topic that just we don't talk enough about. And I don't think that we're educated enough about this, like your average mom comes into the game and we're not, I mean, the doctors tell us when we're pregnant, take care of yourself, and they give you the handouts, but how far do we take it, right? Especially once the children are
Right.
here, then the focus just completely shifts once again to them. We're just the vessel that we're carrying the children in, right? And then the children come out and we're focusing on them, and we are not taking care of this container here.
And part of the healing, I mean, think about all the work that goes into having a baby and how depleting that is to a woman's body. Yeah, you go to that appointment, you go to your first postpartum appointment, they don't ask you what you're eating. Now, granted, those are OBs, they're not nutritionists, it's different schooling.
Right,
obviously.
right.
But, it's a time in our lives where we are in this healing this healing mode. We're healing our body from everything that it's done. We're supposed to be replenishing, and there's never really any support. I mean, I do my best. I have, a number of pregnant clients right now, and I always tell them, like, listen, like, I'm going to be reaching out to you after this baby comes. And, I put together some information for them. I'm like, because no one's going to give you this information, but you have a relationship with a nutritionist who can, but this isn't going to be part of your postpartum, appointments. They kind of check on things. They make sure you're okay. And then they're like, okay, see you later, see you at your 1-year appointment. It's like, oh, that's it. Like, I'm done. Like, you're okay, cool.
I know it just, you kind of feel like you're dropped off at the curb. And again, this is no diss on the OBs. There's a focus, like you said, different schooling. And this is just, I think, one of those dialogues that we still have a long way to go in this culture on taking care of ourselves, women in particular. I think that more conversations need to be had about self-care, and more of a focus needs to be put on that, and more education needs to be put out there at a younger age on how to balance all these things. And if you do choose and you want to become a mom, I mean, there's just so much juggling that goes on, not only physically, but also emotionally and with the hormones. And it's so complex, and it's just so hard to try and make sense of it all, which is honestly, again, why I really wanted to start this podcast and have these kinds of conversations, that I feel like I wasn't even educated enough on at all.
And it's that idea of like and I talk to all my clients about this, adults, elderly, my teens. It's like, well, what do you do for self-care? And they all kind of like stare at me like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you do to take care of yourself? Like, what do you do that makes you happy? And it catches people off guard as a nutritionist. But I'm like, listen, if I'm going to be sitting here telling you like what to be doing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but you're miserable and you haven't like filled your cup, everything I'm going to say is going to fall flat. So I need you taking that, extra time to, do things that bring you joy. And it has not, and we sometimes hear like, oh, it's selfish. It is not selfish.
No,
there should be no guilt. It's taking, like you said, you can't give and not take that minute to refill your own cup. You will be drained, depleted, miserable. You'll get sick. You'll not be good at your job, or you're going to be a resentful mom. You want to put in that little bit of work, and then the benefits are, endless,
right.
Having energy, being more present for our kids, doing our job maybe a little bit more efficiently because we actually ate breakfast instead of just the crust of their toast. Newsflash, that's not breakfast.
Yeah. And by the way, coffee curbs hunger too. Isn't that true?
I always say to people, just because America runs on coffee does not mean you have to like eat your breakfast. Just eat your breakfast, please.
That's our PSA of this episode. Eat your breakfast.
Eat your breakfast. Absolutely.
Oh, Kara, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate all the tips, the tricks, the insight, the humanistic side that you brought to the table today, no pun intended. And I hope that, we just continue to have more of these conversations. And how can people find you if they're interested in, your blog and all these other resources that you put out there?
Sure. So my business is Nourish and Nosh Nutrition. So I have a website, Nourish and Nosh CT for Connecticut.com. On Facebook, it's Nourish and Nosh Nutrition. And my Instagram is Nourish Nosh CT. So I'm on all the social media platforms. I do have a blog that I keep up with. And my Facebook is pretty active as well. And if anyone is interested in working with me, there is a form on my website that you can fill out. And I will get back to you as soon as I see it.
Awesome. And we're looking forward to your content too, related to moms coming out as well. And yeah, we appreciate everything that you're doing and getting this conversation moving. We'll continue to have
Thank
these.
you. Thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
Make sure to subscribe to this new podcast, Mommyhood Unscripted. Share it with your friends, too. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. I'm Nicole Nalepa. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, Mama, you're doing great.